Yeah, I'm like, man, it is an unusually calm day, which is okay. That means you guys get all of our attention. Like, this is going to be amazing. How you doing? Yeah? Yeah, I'm doing good. I'm doing good. That 1 hour was not appreciated. I'll say that for sure. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? Those who made it here on time? Yeah. I'm like, can we get rid of that thing? I'm like, that is horrible. Why do we do that again? Yeah, we went to Rochester yesterday. Jessica's going to be sharing some more about this because we were blessed to get tickets to a Chinese propaganda show. And it was actually really beautiful. Shenyang, anybody ever heard that one? It is beautiful, like really beautiful. Just a great show. But you feel like it's almost like it's a Chinese version of Jehovah's Witnesses. No joke. Like they're wearing the shirts and they're trying to actually talk about this religion all throughout the whole thing. And you're like, is this what other people in the world feel like when Christians come near them? I'm not even kidding. That was just going through my head. I'm like, wait, if this is what this feels like to have like religious dogma like thrown at you, I'm like, is this what other people feel like? I've never experienced this before. It was a very interesting thought. It was very thought-provoking for me. And I'm not going to talk about that today. I just wanted to let you know we had a
recap of last week.
We had a recap of last week coming. I should pray first.
Yes.
That would be a great option for moving forward right now. Father, I say thank you for what you are doing in our midst. Thank you for what you're doing in this house and outside of this house. Thank you that you are building community, that in this process of what we are doing, you are knitting our lives together more and more. There is nothing more beautiful than being able to be in deep and intimate relationship with one another. It doesn't come easy, but it is so valuable. And I pray today that as we continue to move down that road, that you teach us, you open our eyes, open our hearts, our minds to what you're saying, what you're doing. And I know especially today that you would free us, that this would be a day of freedom for so many people, where the things that sometimes unknowingly hide in corners and yet have so much influence on our lives, that they'll be revealed and they'll be broken and they'll be released, and that we will be released to be the children of glory that we are built for. Thank you for this day. In your name, amen. So here, who remembers what I shared about last week? Good students in this place. This is amazing. Nobody remembers? Come on. Fear, yeah. Don't you guys remember me praying over you guys? Lord, more fear. I just pray, give them fear, more fear. You guess some of you remember that? Because we were talking about healthy fear. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and we were going through what that looked like, how that functioned, which was really good. There's one other piece that I wanted to talk about in regards to that's going to transition us into what we're sharing today. And that piece is out of this little phrase where in the church, and in life in general, but in the church we've done this too, we've made fear an idol. An idol is anything that, in essence, has more influence in your life than God. Or you give it more influence in your life. You give it more value. You give it more power. And fear has been an idol in the church for a long time. And one of the ways that I'm going to talk about this just for a moment, and I know this gets a little messy. I want to preface it by saying this. Eschatology, anybody, you guys know what that means? Anybody? Some people do. Eschatology is like the study of end times. We'll put it that way. And there's a lot of end time study in the church or concepts through the Bible. Eschatology is very fluid because it hasn't happened, and there's a lot of theories of what it will be. And that eschatology is very interesting because the charismatic evangelical church in North America took a hold of an eschatology that runs around a word called rapture. And we teach it like crazy. We teach it like, the basic teaching of this is everything gets worse, and then Jesus comes in and saves his church. And the struggle with that is that creates an idol out of fear. Because it's a fear-based push to get people to believe it. Now, one thing about rapture, it's only 200 years old, meaning accepted by the church for 200 years. It's one of the newest beliefs that we have in the church. And the struggle with that, too, is that in the midst of doing that, it has created all kinds of havoc in the process. And it is a theory. Like, evolution. Do you guys know that evolution is hardly even taught in colleges anymore, and it's not taught as barely ever. There's very few professors even teaching evolution as fact because it doesn't make sense scientifically anymore. Like scientifically, scientists are like, Stephen Hawking sits there and he says, evolution doesn't make sense. The earth hasn't even been around long enough for evolution to be functional. Like the earth would have to have been around for billions and billions and trillions of years for evolution to function. He won't give credit to God. Stephen Hawking, you know who Stephen Hawking is? Does anybody? Stephen Hawking is the amazing physicist, math dude that died a few years back. And he said, based on just the math alone, forget the rest of it, evolution is not functional. And he said, we must have been seeded by aliens. I'm like, well, that's getting closer to God, the concept of God. Like God seeded the planet. We get that. We see that in Genesis. And so I'm comparing evolution to rapture. Rapture was a functional concept to get Christians to move out in ministry to touch people's lives at that moment. The hard part is it used fear and it used broken concepts and theologies to reinforce it. And I'm not going to get into teaching it right now, but it took our God as being the most powerful and it actually put him here. And then Christians became bipolar to the rest of the world. In one moment, we sit there and we're like, our God can do anything and all things. He's the all-powerful. He's amazing. Nothing can stand against our God except for the devil. Devil's going to thrash everything he made, and then he's going to come back and save us. Yeah, the Antichrist. So here's the little piece that I'm going to leave you with this one, just to mess you up. And you can talk to me about this anytime you want. I love talking about this stuff. There are more scriptures, way more scriptures in our Bible that talk about his glory overcoming this whole earth, that talk about his kingdom being established and nothing being able to come against it. There are more verses that talk about a victorious God on a victorious planet Earth than there are that talk about burning. And by the way, just so you know, almost every time it talks about fire in the Bible, it's not meant literally, and yet somehow when we want to talk about the end times, we're like, it's literal. He meant the earth is going to burn. And I'm like, yeah, remember when Joseph is there with his family and he's like, the sun, the moon, and the stars will bow down before me? Do you guys remember that? Who are the sun, the moon, and the stars? His family, okay. And then Jesus says the sun, the moon, and the stars will fall. Are the sun, the moon, and the stars going to fall onto the earth? Okay. Oh, I wonder what he was talking about then. I'm just saying that sometimes we take things without studying the actual context, without studying the culture, without studying all of that stuff, and we create a belief out of it. Rapture is one of those beliefs. I do not have an answer for you for the end times. All I tell people is I have a victorious eschatology. End times have to line up with the character of my God. Did you guys hear that? Anything in my Bible, as I learn about Jesus, I look at his character and then I say everything has to line up with his character. If it doesn't line up with his character, I'm believing a lie. And I have to go back to my scripture and be like, why did I get this? Why do I believe this? And so, rapture theology took fear, put it up here, and fear became the mandate by which Christians moved. That worked really good for the first 100 years. It was one of the most powerful missions movements on this planet. Isn't that amazing? Scared people into telling people about Jesus because he's coming back soon. Do you know how long they said he's coming back soon? When that rapture thing started, every generation that had the rapture teaching said he's coming back in this generation. And the hard part about it is with fear being the manipulator and the movement of this thing, you suddenly have a church that as that missions movement begins to slow down, they are putting walls up, protecting themselves from what's to come. And the church that once started out with this fear-based thing, we got to tell all the world, we got to tell them now. Did you know that almost all the world's been told? Christianity is one of the most amazing religions on the planet as far as its impact and its reach. Just stating some facts here. And so, in the midst of that, though, the church isolated, drew away from society because of this fear of society and this fear of the devil, and they created the fear that was more powerful than their God. Right now, that fear is being dismantled, and people are being taught, your God is more powerful than anything in the world. He that is in me, greater is he that is in me, right? Greater is he that is in me. Do we believe that? Do we actually believe that? That means everywhere I go, I am the dominant species. Everywhere I go. That means this world is mine. 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 Look at it's like what was that? Like the what was that on Nemo? Mine,
seagulls.
mine. Seagulls.
Mine.
Yeah, just get the seagulls in your mind. I wish I had a clip of that right now. Mine. Yes, this is ours. And it's time that we begin to dismantle that fear, get it out of there, and guess what? There's probably like 5 or 6 different eschatological beliefs that you guys can have. I don't know which one is perfect. I don't know which one is right. They're all theory. We're going to go through investigations.
I like Isaiah. Of the increase of his government and peace, there shall be no end. That's what we see in the world, right? Christianity has continued to grow from 1 man to 12 men to 70 to 120 to 300 to thousands to millions all over the world.
As a side note to this, in the 200 years that theology has taken a hold of Western Christian thinking, meaning this is not believed in the rest of the world. It's only believed in North America. How has the influence of the church gone in North America over the past 200 years? Isn't it amazing what fear does? It removes you from being influencers in society. Because suddenly society is more powerful than what you carry. Super dangerous. So, I don't believe in the rapture. You can if you want. Like, totally cool, because in the end, Jesus still saves both of us. Seriously. That's still what it's going to be in the end. Like, that's the awesome part about it. So if you believe in the rapture, I will not hate you. I will actually think you're awesome. I may not agree with you, but it's super cool. Can we have differences of opinions in a church? Yes. Like, really, can we? Yes. And I'm like, so, I might beat up on the rapture a little bit, but I won't beat up on you. And all that to say this is we cannot be a bipolar church. And that teaching created fear that was put up here, and it created a God that was down here. Unintentionally. It was good-intentioned men and women that were leading this thing. Unfortunately, fear became the leader and the idol. And you know when fear is the idol because the influence completely wanes. If God is the main focus, your influence only grows. That's his kingdom. His kingdom only grows. If you're not growing, you don't have kingdom. If your life isn't growing all around you, wherever your life isn't growing, there's a lack of kingdom. His kingdom grows. Does it face things? Yes. Will it face tribulation? Will it face things? Yes, it will face difficult moments. But it, by its own DNA, will grow. It will always grow. Does that make sense? I'm just debunking that one for a moment, and I want to move forward with that. But so, in getting to where we have to go today, in one of those pieces, it created also a very judgmental attitude within the church, very judgmental, because it is focused on judgment. That New Testament is a messy place, man. New Testament and Old Testament. One verse is talking about judgment. The next verse, Jesus is like, I don't judge you. You're like, which one is it? Like, go figure it out. I'm not going to tell you today. You have that both. It's funny how Christians, by the way, as a side note to the whole rapture thing, like I said before, there are this handful of verses that talk about rapture theology, and there are 100 more that talk about victorious eschatology. Why do we gravitate towards the handful? Can somebody tell me this? When almost all the Bible's like, you will reign, you will reign, you will reign. We're like, we're going to first go through hell, and the world's going to burn, and then Jesus is going to come back, and he'll reign. And he's over there like, I said you're going to reign. Sorry, man. He told Adam, like, who did he give the earth to? Yeah, fill the earth and subdue it was told to who? Adam and Eve, his children. That mandate has never ended. I hope this is making a little bit of sense to you guys. And so, in the midst of that, I'm going to take the majority of Scripture. That's going to be my guide. I'm not going to take a couple verses that don't make sense in the rest of, compared to the rest of it. Does that help a little bit? No, whatever. Study it. And so, in the midst of this, the whole judgment piece too, it created a place of judgment in Christians' hearts and minds, their movements, because they believed in a God that was going to judge the world harshly and with an iron fist, and he was going to come down hard on everybody. And in the midst of that, they separated the Father out of this equation, and they created a place of this judge Lord. He's a Lord, he's a judge, without question. But when you put the judge and the Lord above the Father, do you know what you actually divorce? You divorce relationship from the equation. A judge doesn't care about relationship. A Lord is only concerned about what his people are doing for him. A father, oh man, a father makes all the difference. Who did Jesus talk about? God, when Jesus talked about God, who did he refer to him as the most? Father. 12 times in the Old Testament we see the word Father. 250 times we see it in the Gospels. What I'm trying to say is this is a season where we are offering to the world this movement away from judgment, and we're bringing them back into this place of relationship with the Father. Is this making sense? You guys hearing me here? Because relationship, this is funny. Do you want to know why people that struggle with homosexuality have no desire to be in our evangelical churches? Judgment. Guess what? This is going to sound really horrible. There's sin in these chairs that needs to be dealt with. And yet, we'll judge the homosexual before we will judge ourselves. We'll judge the person that comes in and looks different and looks off or looks like that or the other before we will sit there and realize what we're doing. We completely miss the mark. Why do people not want to be in the church? Because the church has thrived on judgment. When I will, this is going to sound, I'm going to say this really quick and then let my beautiful wife share some of her stuff too. I will not sit there and tell a homosexual that I'm dealing with what they want to hear. So many homosexuals have been burned by the church that when I get into a conversation with one and they find out that I'm a pastor, and the first thing that they ask me is, well, what do you think about my lifestyle? I won't tell them, oh, I think it's sin. I'm like, what do you think about my lifestyle? I want to hear what they have to say. I know that I will have no influence in their life if I don't first have the opportunity to build relationship. Yes, see? Confirmation. My encouragement in this place is like, one of the greatest stories to me is the story of the prostitute that was caught in her sin. She's caught in her sin. How do you catch a prostitute in her sin? That's pretty bad. I don't know what was planned there. They were looking for somebody. They knew, like, we're going to bring this woman before Jesus. Just wait till about 1 o'clock when all the guys get off of lunch, and we'll catch her then. Like, this was some evil, heinous plan that was hatched beforehand. And so this prostitute is caught in sin, and she's brought before Jesus to stone her, to pass judgment on her. Judgment, judgment, judgment time, because that's what the church expects. What's he do? He gets down in the dirt, for one. I think it's something we got to learn to do as a church. He gets down in the dirt next to this woman, doesn't even look at all of these men accusing her. He gets down there in the dirt. We don't know what he writes, but whatever it is, it completely convicts the hearts of these men. And they're all gone. And then what does he say to her? This is rhetorical, don't answer it. Where are your accusers? And she's like, there are none. And what does he say to her? Neither do I. He passes no judgment. Her sin is right there, as clear as day for everybody to see. And then he gives her what everyone treats like a command. I said, this wasn't a command. When he says, go and sin no more, that was not a command. He's not saying to her, go, sin no more, because I'm watching you. I'm watching you. You do that again, I swear to God, that was your last chance. I'm going, lightning. You're gone. He was saying to her, I just loved you like no man has ever loved you. And I know my love changes people. A relationship of a man just stepped into your life like no man has ever been. You just tasted freedom. You now have the freedom
to no longer sin. Because I'm no longer calling you a prostitute, I'm calling you a daughter. I'm calling you worthy, worthwhile, and beautiful. That's why I don't like the song Amazing Grace. Did you know that? I can't sing it, that one part. Just like that inheritance thing, when I'm like, oh, dang, I didn't realize that. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved. I'm not a wretch. He never looked down even for a moment and said, there's a wretch. I struggle with that part of that song. You follow me? Huh? Yeah, it could be your own thought process, which still, Jessica's going to talk about that. Judgment destroys us, it kills us. And the hard part about that is there's a piece of judgment that people walk in all the time that they don't realize they're doing to themselves. And that's where I'm going to leave it to you.
Okay. So the story in John 8 is actually the perfect story to kick off. I want to talk about being free from shame. Because a lot of times we believe this lie from the pit of hell that shame is actually something that we should embrace, that shame is actually a way that we will empower ourselves to walk away from sin. But that is the exact opposite of what shame does. And so we're going to take a look at that today. In that moment with the woman, when everyone was circled around her and yelling and ready to kill her, Jesus actually said the words, who is it that is without sin? Let him cast the first stone, right? And then when they left, because they all knew they had sin, he said, none of them have condemned you. Neither do I condemn you. And what he was doing in that moment was he was actually breaking the power of shame off of the woman. He was saying to her, hey, I know your sin has been exposed right now. I know that you've just been ripped out of the middle of the worst sin that you've been doing, living in, and you've been thrust in front of the whole town. And shame would want to just keep you trapped in that place of feeling unworthy, of feeling worthless, of feeling unacceptable to the community. But guess what? I want you to see every single person standing here, they have sin too. You're not the only one who struggles with sin. Jesus was breaking the power of shame off of the woman who was caught in adultery. I don't know where the dude was, by the way, because obviously you can't commit adultery by yourself. But anyhow, that's for another day. But he wanted her to see that she did not need to live under the cloud of shame that she had lived in before. And then he even said those very words. Not only did he say, hey, these guys all sin and they are never going to condemn you anymore. They're gone. Guess what? I, who have no sin, I don't condemn you either. Because the power of shame, we're going to look in Genesis. I want you to go to Genesis 2. The power of shame is really crazily overwhelming. And people who live in shame, see, a lot of times we think we can partner with a spirit that is not from God. And we don't even recognize. What does Romans 8:1 tell us? There is therefore now how much condemnation? No. There's a ton of condemnation from God, isn't there? No, maybe there's just a little bit of condemnation from God when we screw up. No, how much condemnation is there? How much? Zero, none. No more condemnation for those who live in Christ Jesus, right? He does not want us to walk in condemnation and shame. The power of that to trap us in sin is huge. So Genesis 2, we're going to look at the last verse, 25. And who's got their Bible open and ready? Anyone? Rich.
We're going to do sword drills. Anybody remember sword drills?
Adam and his
Nobody
wife
did
were
those?
both naked, and they felt no shame.
They were naked and they had no shame. When God created human beings, how much shame did they walk in? None. Zero. Nothing. They were not ashamed. So then we'll skip ahead to chapter 3. And I'm just, for the sake of time, I'm going to go down to verse 7. After they've sinned, you know the deal. The serpent comes. He talks to Eve. She buys the bait. Then she tells her husband, and he disobeys intentionally. She's deceived. He disobeys. They both eat the fruit. All of a sudden, now the first result of sin comes in. It says in verse 7, at that moment their eyes were opened and they suddenly felt shame. That is the fruit of the devil. That's the fruit of sin. They suddenly felt shame. So they sewed fig leaves together to cover their nakedness. Okay, now pay attention, because shame has an agenda. Shame has a plan for your life, and it speaks to us. When the cool evening breezes were blowing, the man and his wife heard the Lord God walking about in the garden. So they hid from the Lord God among the trees. Why did they hide? They were ashamed. So, oh, wait a minute. Carrying shame, thinking shameful thoughts about ourselves doesn't actually take us closer to God. What does it do? It makes us go away from God. We run away. They heard God coming, and instead of running to God and saying, oh no, we need help, God, we messed up, shame said, get away from God. Go as far as you can and hide yourself from God. Now, who do you think wants you to be disconnected from God? The devil. Shame is a spirit that comes to us and speaks to us to drive us from God's presence. So he calls out to them, where are you? And the man replies, I heard you walking in the garden, so I hid. And this is another fruit of shame. He said, I was afraid. Shame breeds fear in us. Fear of God, fear of other people finding out what we've done. So now we're walking around with this dark, shameful feeling. We have fear constantly that someone's going to find it out, or that it's going to be exposed, like the woman who was caught and was naked and thrust into the middle of the city. And everything inside us, that voice of shame, is telling us to get away from God and get away from the place of light. So shame is this powerful force of darkness. And I want to take a look here in Daniel 9. It says this, Lord, you are right. So Daniel is talking with the Lord, and he's talking about the situation in Israel, and he's talking about the holiness of God and the justice of God and where Israel is at. They're in a shambles, they're in captivity. And he says, Lord, you are in the right. You've done everything righteous and holy, but as you see, our faces are covered with shame. And I want us to pay attention. When someone's feeling shameful, or when we feel shameful, you can see that on your face, right? You can tell someone's countenance is down. They look kind of dreary and gray. They're not having that joy and that freedom and that place of connection with people around them because they feel shame, right? So you can see shame. Shame, their faces were covered with shame. And he goes on and says, this is true of all of us, including the people of Judah and Jerusalem and all of Israel, scattered near and far, wherever you've driven us because of our disloyalty to you. O Lord, we, our kings and our princes and ancestors, are covered with shame because we've sinned against you. I want you to see it almost like a robe that gets put on you, right? We read in Scripture there's a garment of praise, right? Well, this is a garment of shame. And so your face, it displays shame. Your body is weighed down with shame. But there is a remedy for shame, and the remedy of that is confession, is the light, bringing it into the light, right? This is the very opposite. When you feel ashamed, the last thing you want to do is expose whatever you're ashamed of, right? That's the very most fearful thing, is like, because the enemy knows that when you bring that shameful thing into the light, the power of it will be broken. So he tries to keep us in darkness and keep us hiding. And Psalm 34, verse 4 says this. So this is talking about bringing it to the Lord. I prayed to the Lord, and he answered me. He freed me from all my fears. Those who look to him for help will be radiant with joy. Say, radiant with joy. No shadow of shame will darken their faces. Right? That's a good one. Write that one down. Psalm 34, verse 4. If shame has been something in your life that has spoken to you, I know, Justin, did you want to share the one thing?
The one thing.
The one thing. Don't take it over, man.
I'll be real quick with this one, and because I know I've shared this here before, and as many of you have heard me sharing about my journey out of pornography, because I had struggled with it from 15 years old, and it wasn't until 5 years ago that it was totally broken off of my life, but it was the moment that it was broken off that forever changed me, because so often when I would have a struggle with it, and even into marriage and all that other stuff, I would sit there beating myself up. Anybody ever done that? I'm not saying necessarily with pornography, but you beat yourself up for whatever thing you did that you know was wrong. You're sitting there like, oh man, I'm this, I'm that, I've done it again. And I remember the times where I would always tell Jessica when I would screw up with pornography, and I'd be like, honey, I felt gross, I felt horrible, I felt evil, I felt all this stuff, and I would stew in it, and I would hate myself over it, and I would sit there being like, oh God, the sinner that I am. And in that, I never saw freedom from pornography, like ever. It's funny, but I promise you this, shame will always keep you bound to your sin. You can't escape sin if shame is a part of the equation. Because shame, again, like Jessica said, it becomes that wall between you and God, and it's like, farther away, push him farther away. And so 5 years ago, Jessica and the kids had left the house, and I don't know what mood I was in, but apparently it wasn't good. Pulled out an iPad, looked at porn. And I set that iPad down, and I remember setting that iPad down feeling like I screwed up again, and I could hear God speak to me as clear as a bell in that moment. And he says, like really, almost audible, don't do it. Don't go there. I'm like, what? He said, don't go there. And I'm like, what do you mean? I just screwed up again. He's like, you don't go into shame, you do not go into guilt. I'm like, but I just screwed up. I need to feel bad. And he's like, that's not feeling bad. That's coming under a spirit that wants to own you. I'm sitting there like, huh? So I'm supposed to be like joyful right now? No joke. And I feel him, and he begins to talk to me. He's like, you are my son. You are righteous. You are an overcomer. Those are your identities. Shame will never give you access to those. Never. And in one moment, I'm walking out like, honey, I looked at porn again. I probably didn't sound that excited in that moment. Yeah, that sounds really bad. But I confessed it to her again, but I said, but this was totally different from any other time. I heard God speak to me in a way that I'd never heard him speak to me before. And that was 5 years ago. And all I can tell you is this, the lust was gone. The struggle with it was gone. Everything was gone. And instead of being somebody like feeling like, when's it going to happen again? There was this weird confidence like, this is going to sound interesting too. It's never going to happen again. And even if it does, it doesn't have me. That sound interesting? And I've never gone back to it. I've never been this clean from porn, 5 years. And I didn't even remember. I didn't remember the time. Jessica had to remind me the time. Oh, remember, I remember that. It was this. I thought it was 4 years. I'm like, oh, I'm only 4 years out. I'm like, and she's like, no, it was this date at this time. And I'm like, oh, you're so good with the details. It was 5 years ago. Because by the way, it's like Alcoholics Anonymous if you have shame. You always identify as an alcoholic. And you always identify how far back your last drink was. You're tethered to your sin. Shame will keep you tethered to your sin. You're always counting the days from the last time you sinned and hoping that you don't do it again. And so, by the way, this doesn't mean like go out and test the theory, like I'm going to go look at porn just so I can be free from
sin
shame.
and have no shame. No.
That's not what I'm saying. Like, don't go test it out. What I'm saying is that in this house today, there is grace to be free from shame. Grace means you are not, grace doesn't sit there and
I lost the word for it. I'll say it this way. Grace empowers. It doesn't enable. Enabling means you're stuck. Empowering means you just graduated to a whole nother level. And I'm saying that today, as we break shame off, there's going to be grace in this room to empower you to no longer walk in that thing anymore, because shame removes you from your identity, like completely removes you from your identity. You have no access to being a son or a daughter if you live in shame. Not by his choosing, but by our own. This is making a little bit of sense with you guys? So that was a really awesome day for me.
Yeah, and it's amazing because we have believed this lie, like I said, that shame and partnering with shame and listening to shame and beating ourselves up, allowing shame to be our master in that time, is actually the power that will free us. But we know when we look around at other situations, like someone, maybe you struggle with eating and you overeat, and looking at yourself in the mirror every day saying, I hate how I look. I'm a fat, disgusting pig. I'm so disgusting. This is just, and ripping yourself to shreds of how you look, that is not going to make you motivated to get healthy, right? That is going to make you the opposite, wallowing in pain and looking for comfort outside of the presence of God because you're steeped in shame, right? That's the goal of shame, is to keep you cycling around and around the mountain and never getting free from the thing that you're struggling with. So you have to watch, what spirit are you partnering with? Is it a fruit of the Holy Spirit that you're hearing? Is it something, let's say the fruit of the Spirit. What are they? Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. If it doesn't sound like that, and it doesn't produce that in you, that's not the right spirit. You're not listening to the right voice. Anything besides one of those things is coming from the enemy. And this is the crazy thing. So Daniel, in Daniel 9, it says, I went on praying. Daniel's talking about this still. I went on praying and confessing my sin and the sin of my people, pleading with the Lord my God for Jerusalem. As I was praying, Gabriel, whom I had seen earlier in a vision, came swiftly to me at the time of the evening sacrifice. In verse 22, he explained to me, Daniel, I've come here to give you insight and understanding. Verse 23, the moment you began praying, a command was given. Wait, was it after Daniel felt grieved over the sin for hours or days, or laid around saying, woe to us? When was it that God answered his prayer? Immediately. Just like Justin was talking about, the moment that he sinned, he was able to turn to God and repent. Now, this is the funny thing, okay? I'm going to give you a real life situation, you guys.
Uh-oh.
So yesterday, we were going to Shenyang.
So fresh.
Justin told you at the start we were going to
still bleeding
Shenyang.
from this one.
And we're all, dolled up for the theater and all that.
Well,
and
I was dolled up for a funeral.
Yeah. And I snapped this picture of us right before we go into Chipotle. We're going to go get dinner, and then we're going to drive to Rochester for the show. And so I get this picture like, yay, we're on a date, and it's such a great night. And then we go into Chipotle all happy, and, and we get in the line, and we're standing in the line, and Justin notices a soldier in uniform, and he's just finished checking out. So he goes out of the line, and he walks all the way across the room, and he goes up to the soldier, and he thanks him for his service. And then he turns around, and he's coming back to the line, and I can tell by his face that he's feeling self-conscious because he just walked out in front of everyone from the line, and they're all looking over like, what's this guy doing, And so he's feeling self-conscious, so his face is kind of contorted in this like grimacy, weird expression.
Use the word you used, honey.
I said it looked like a snarl instead of a smile.
Snarl. It was a snarl.
And so I'm thinking, well, this was such a great thing that he did, but remember, he's just come from a funeral. So he's got his hair super slicked. He's got this tight tie, bow tie suit thing, and his face is in this like angry, snarly look. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you look like this crazy, like, I don't know what, white supremacist, angry, crazy person, you know, like, it's like going over to the military, like, hello, yes, good job for fighting, and rah, 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 you know, and just like walking back, like this weird, so I'm trying to say something about his, you know, you need to smile, you should smile, that was good what you did, but I didn't pay attention to Danny Silk's advice, which is always what? The love sandwich, right? You got to say the good thing, then you say the thing, and then you say another good thing. So I didn't do that. I didn't say, good job, honey, that was awesome of you. The first thing I said was like, hey, I don't know if you realize, but your face looks like you're snarling instead of smiling. And he was already self-conscious, so that triggered him. How many of you wives have ever been in public and you say something to your spouse, and I don't know if it's just men, but I've noticed a lot of men, when I talk to wives, get very conscious of how other people hear or see or whatever, like between them and their wife, right? And so that was that moment in the Chipotle line, like, all these people just heard you say this, and now I'm like 10 times more embarrassed than I already was, and I'm like oblivious to all this, and so I'm just like, oh, you know, and we get our Chipotle, and I'm thinking, great, we're going out to the car, la da da, and how many of you know what's coming in the car? Yes, we get in the car, pop open the Chipotle, and Justin's like, so honey, do you realize what you just did, you know? I'm like, no, got my Chipotle with you? And he's like, you corrected me again.
I did not yell. I did not yell.
No,
Not
he was
yelling.
nice.
I was very calm.
But he was like, you corrected me again. That was embarrassing. You didn't even say anything positive about what I did, and da-da-da, right? And it goes into this thing. And then I get triggered because I'm thinking, oh my gosh, like I was totally having a good time. I said a tiny thing, and it feels like I just stepped on a landmine, like, bro, you know, now we have this big conflict we have to fix on our date. And I'm just like, ah. So I'm sitting there, and, you know, all those things going through your head, and he's like, well, are you going to say something? Are you going to, and I'm like,
She's like, yeah, I'm going to say something.
no, fair.
I'm like, oh, bullet holes, more!
No, we didn't start there. We worked our way up to there.
Yeah, we worked our way up to that part.
But I started with the tense-lipped, like, yeah, honey, I'm really sorry I said that. I did not mean to hurt you. You know, and he's like, are you going to talk to me? Are you know, whatever? And I'm like, why? There's no point, you know, and he's trying to like prod me for something, and I'm in my head hearing this voice of like, it's pointless. If you tell him how you feel and that you didn't mean to hurt him, then you're going to sound like you're justifying yourself, and he always says that you can't even apologize without an explanation, and da-da-da, right? And so this whole thing is going in my head, and I'm like, and just feeling totally hopeless about communicating positively. And so anyhow, my tension's growing, his tension's growing, and as we're driving, it's not improving. We tried at points to pray or whatever, and it escalates to the point where we start yelling in the car on the way to Shenyang, okay? So...
And nobody's ever done that, though, so I'm
No,
sure.
never. None of you have ever gotten into a yelling fight with your spouse or your kids or someone close to you.
I knew this church was full of perfect people. Yes.
Never. Yeah, or Shenyang. So we yell, and I'm just finished yelling. And how many of you have had this moment where, like, you're in the middle of this horrible thing, and then you feel like the Lord, just like Scripture says, you know, like He'll provide a way of escape for you from your temptation. So the Lord just shifts this, like, moment of, like, where all of a sudden, like, everything lightens up. And I actually looked at him and I started laughing, like, this is the most ridiculous fight. We've been fighting for like an hour because I told you should have smiled. What's happening here, you know? Like, and so I was like able, in that moment, I was ready to just like, let's just let it go. I'm sorry, let's pray, you know. But he wasn't there. So, you know, then he reacted. So anyway, point being, as soon as we got to that point And I had this moment where it was like, okay, I should just pray. I should pray and shift the atmosphere. And I can take authority over this atmosphere. And in my head, I'm hearing this little voice like, oh, you are such a hypocrite. The way you just yelled at Justin and you released all this nasty atmosphere, and then you're going to come in like you're so spiritual and try and pray and take it over and da da da. You know, and I'm hearing this in my head where I'm thinking like, feeling ashamed of how I behaved and feeling unworthy to pray and do the right thing. Who's ever been there? And it was so crazy to me where I'm sitting there like, oh my gosh, shame wants me to stay in this bad place of being disconnected from my husband, of feeling unworthy to release God's presence or do anything, you know. And so it was crazy. So we did end the night well in the end. Yay! Yay for progress! And so then you'd think it'd be done, right? But no, I woke up this morning and then this little voice is there like, oh, you're going to get up and preach now today after the way you yelled at your husband yesterday? What a hypocrite you are. I can't believe, da, 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 you know. And I'm like, and you know, you feel it. You feel that weight of shame come over you and you feel unworthy and you feel like you can't do what God wants you to do. And I had to break agreement with that. I had to, you know, say, no, this is not what God is saying to me. This is not what God wants for me, right? But that's the thing. Shame is tricky that way. We have created a shame culture in the church. It's in the world too. Don't get me wrong. We grew up in it. That's what we're used to.
And actually, one small note to that, the other struggle is even if you're not feeling shame, we've been so trained in it that we want other people to feel shame before we give them forgiveness.
Right.
Yeah, as spouses, you know this better than anybody else. You're like, well, when I see you ready to be forgiven, I'm going to forgive you. But I don't see that remorse, and so you ain't getting forgiven. Yeah, some of you know exactly what I'm talking about. Or you know what the really scary part is? We do it with our kids too. This is the scarier part. That whole verse where it talks about there is no fear of punishment in love. Like, we shame our kids, and it's one of the reasons why we wonder, like, why don't they come to me with stuff? They don't come to us with stuff because we've created a culture where they feel ashamed. Because that's what we've been raised in the church. Shame, 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 shame on you. It's scary, and we didn't even see it. Anyways.
So, the antidote for shame. Who wants to get set free from shame? So the antidote for shame is bringing it into the light, confessing it not just to God, but actually even to people, other people, right? Because shame always says, well, if they really knew, if they only knew what you did in secret, even if you did it 10 years ago, right? It will always have a hold over you. And I remember this day when I was 18 years old at the Toronto Airport Church. I was at the Father Loves You conference, and it was all about encountering the Father, getting your identity restored, moving out of being an orphan, and coming into that place of the love of the Father, being a daughter. And so this thing that was working on me was all through in my teen years when I had dated. I didn't have sex, but I did enough that I had all this guilt and shame over what I had done. And my dad would all the time come up to me and be like, "You're such an angel. You're like so perfect. And I can't believe it's like you just fell out of heaven." And the whole while he's saying that, inside it's like, if you really knew, you wouldn't feel this way about me. And so this shame would, every time I would get praise, I couldn't even receive praise. I couldn't receive good words about me because I had shame. So if you can't receive people's good words, you probably have a stronghold of shame. So I had this day where the Lord said, I want you to get free from this. You need to confess to your parents. They were at the conference, and it was like, okay, what does that mean? And he's like, I want you to say it all. Anything you're afraid to tell them, tell it all. And I'm like, 18 years old, like you find your mom and dad, so remember when I dated this boy, so-and-so, and I went through every single thing that I did that I had shame over, right? And I cried.
It has a really good memory.
I do have a really good memory. That was a long conversation, but I'm sure equally uncomfortable for my parents to listen to. But I was crying, and so they prayed with me. They forgave me. Good, done. Okay, then lunchtime rolls around and God's like, I want you to tell, because I was in the school of ministry at the time, and I hadn't done anything during the school, but in the back of my mind was, if they really knew all these things you've done, they wouldn't have accepted you to the school. And so I had this fear, and God's like, you got to tell them. You got to find the leaders of the school, and you got to tell them what you told your parents so that you can get free from it. And I'm thinking, oh, are you kidding me? So sure enough, I find them and I spill my guts and I'm crying and all this, and they pray and they forgive me and they love me, Okay, good, done. Whew. By now my eyes are like, Then the nighttime, they do this altar call and they say, any of you young people, if you're struggling with shame, sexual sins, we want you to come forward. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh. And I hear the Lord say, I want you to go. And I'm like, but I already told it twice today. What the heck, And he's like, but you're afraid that if you were to walk up in front of the whole entire church, they would know and that they would think badly of you. Who's ever been there, right? You don't want to answer the altar call because everyone's going to know. That's shame talking to you, trying to keep you from getting free. So I was like, okay. So I did. I walked right up to the front and I told my whole spiel again and they prayed with me. And the third time it was broken. It was all gone. God said, every single area where you were afraid, you brought it out. You brought the shame out into the light and you broke that power of shame and fear off of your thinking and off of your heart. And it was like, whoa, I feel that. I felt light. I felt free. I felt like all those things that were in the background of like, if they really knew, it was all gone because everyone knew everything. There was no fear anymore. It's an amazing place. It's a beautiful place. It's terrifying to get there, but it's so wonderful when you do. And I made this choice at 18 years old. From now on, I am going to walk in a place of transparency and vulnerability because I never want to go back to that prison of shame ever again. Never. And so I have literally changed how I've lived my life because of tasting the difference between bondage and freedom. And the Lord, it says, Jesus said, that the Father is seeking those who worship in spirit and in truth, right? And we say that all the time. And we think, yep, I'm in truth means I'm going to say the right words. I'm going to confess the truth about who God is. No, that's not what that word means. That word means with nothing hidden, having nothing hidden. So coming to that place where we expose those things, because guess what? The lie is that God won't be glorified through us when we expose those things we're ashamed of, right? We're afraid that it ruins our testimony and all this stuff, right? But the true glory is that it's not us. That it's not our righteousness, that it's not our perfection, that it's Christ in us. And that is what gives God the glory, right? Anything good that I do is not me, it's Christ in me. And when I'm allowing those weak areas of myself to be seen and known, it inspires people near me who are struggling with shame or with brokenness or with a thing that they can't get out of to realize, oh, God helped them. He can help me too, right? It actually releases God's glory when we can bring those things out and walk in a way that is free from shame. So I'm going to round it up because I know we're at 1, but that has been God's goal, right? From the moment he created us, he wanted us to walk without shame, and he wanted us to display his glory, to be carriers of his glory, children of light, right? And we fell and we partnered with the voice of the accuser and we walked in shame, and shame kept us in a prison of never feeling worthy to go to God and running from God and hiding and all of that. And then Jesus came And what did Jesus do? Jesus took our place of shame. The place of the cross was one of the most shameful, despised places. He was naked on our behalf, right? Do you think it's a coincidence that in the Garden of Eden, they were naked and they tried to hide themselves, and then Jesus comes, and in the moment of redeeming humanity, he's naked, redeeming us, taking all that place of shame back. And what does it say? That he despised the shame. He endured the cross for the joy set before him, and he despised the shame, and he sat down at the right hand of the Father, and he was honored, right, in that place. So he's transitioning us out of a shame lifestyle into a place of walking in the glory of God, in the freedom of God, displaying the honor of God. Are you seated right now with Jesus in heavenly places? Yes, then you are seated in the seat of honor in close proximity, right beside the Father, right? So he was doing that transformation from shame. Isaiah 61, my favorite passage. Jesus announced his ministry with it, right? What does he say? He says, instead of their shame and disgrace, they will inherit a double portion of honor. And this is really important, actually. I want you to just see this. Go there, Isaiah 61, really quick. Isaiah 61:6. While you're turning, I'll start reading it. It says, you will be called priests of the Lord, ministers of our God, which I preached on a couple weeks ago. You will feed on the treasures of the nations and boast in their riches. Instead of shame and dishonor, you will enjoy a double share of honor. You will possess a double portion of prosperity in your land, and everlasting joy will be yours. Now, this is what happens when we get rid of shame and we receive God's perspective of who we are, and we walk in that place of his love. Suddenly we know that we are favored by God. And we have this place, because we're favored by God, that we begin to see breakthrough, right? It says that you will not only have a double share of honor, but you'll possess a double portion of prosperity. The scripture says that we will prosper as our soul prospers. Right? So as we know that we're loved and we're favored by God and we're accepted and we're children of light, we begin to prosper in all ways, in our health, in our finances, in our relationships, because shame no longer has this power over us. And people who don't walk in shame also, they know they're favored, they begin to prosper in all their ways of their life, and they walk in this abundant joy. There's a progression there of what this produces, this revelation of living without the power of shame and condemnation. So, Jesus wants us to exchange it. The end result, Revelation 19, right? When he's coming for his bride, what does it describe the bride? It says, the time has come for the wedding feast of the Lamb. His bride has prepared herself. She has been given the finest of pure white linen to wear, for the fine linen represents the good deeds of God's holy people, the righteousness, right? And so she's clothed, radiant, and ready for Jesus, because she now walks in this place of holiness and purity and righteousness that she could not have attained without being free from the power of shame. I couldn't get into Hebrews 12 when it talks about the discipline of the Lord, but the point of the discipline of the Lord is not to produce shame, but it's to bring about, it says afterwards, it will produce the peaceable fruit of righteousness in your life. Right living, holiness. Because that's been God's goal all along. He doesn't want you to walk around in shame and disgrace and condemnation. He says it over and over and over. There's no condemnation. Say that to your neighbor. There's no condemnation. God doesn't want you to walk in condemnation, right? The goal is for you to know that you're loved, to be able to come into his presence, and to walk with holiness and righteousness and joy because you're loved by God.
So stand up. because we went over, and I'm sorry about that.
So we got to just, for closing
So
prayer.
what I want to do with the closing prayer is really simple. One, with your mic off, with confession, don't confess to people that are judgy, please. Because I promise you this, your shame will only increase with them. Or they'll try to increase it. Yeah, you end up receiving what you receive. If somebody is there to judge you, oh my goodness, your shame will be like, and also don't go to people that are enablers. They'll be like, oh, honey, I was just like that too. Don't worry, honey. Rich is my honey.
Well,
and to people that are sit there, I understand.
Listen to Holy Spirit.
I understand empathy and sympathy, both good. But if they're not calling you up to the truth of who you are, like that is also somebody you got to be really careful about who you confess stuff to, because you don't want to sit in a pity party with somebody that's just going to be like, oh, it's okay. It's not okay. It's still not okay. But when you're around people that actually believe the truth about you, that understand what it means to move in compassion, they'll see your shame and they'll be like, don't carry that shame. You're better than that. Yeah. Like, yeah, you sinned, but get past it, man. You're awesome, or woman, you're awesome. Find those people like you. We need to confess that stuff, hands down. That's why God had me doing the confessing of the pornography until I got free of that thing. That was horrible. It felt horrible every time.
And pay attention to who you're afraid to confess it to, because sometimes that's a clue who you need to confess to as well. Like for me with my parents or the teachers over me, right? Those are the people. If you're still walking around later after you said what you said to whoever you said it to and you still have fear, I had to confess it 3 times because I had to get rid of all the fear in those areas of those important relationships in my life where shame had a stronghold. And until I got it into the light and broke that power, it was going to continue to speak to me if they really knew, right? So pay attention. Who are you afraid to tell, and who's Holy Spirit directed you to?
Okay, so pray this real quick prayer with me. Father, I wasn't built to carry shame.
I wasn't built to carry shame.
I was built to carry glory.
I was built to carry glory.
I don't want shame in my life.
I don't want shame in my life.
I give you permission to reveal it.
I give you permission to reveal it.
And I receive your grace to remove it.
And I receive your grace to remove it.
Shame will not control me anymore.
Shame will not control me anymore.
It will not bind me to my sin.
It will not bind me to my sin.
The same sin that you got rid of.
The same sin that you got rid of.
Greater is he that is in me.
Greater is he that is in me.
Than he that is in the world.
Than he that's in the world.
And you don't ever bring shame, you bring glory.
And you don't ever bring shame, you bring glory.
So I receive your glory.
So I receive your glory.
I receive your grace.
I receive your grace.
I receive your conviction to change.
I receive your conviction to change.
And I look forward with expectation.
And I look forward with expectation.
To the moments and the days ahead.
To the moments and the days ahead.
I am your child.
I am your child.
And I'm going to live like that.
And I'm going to live like that.
Amen.
Amen.
Okay, say hi to somebody.
Give them a hug.
Go get your kids. I'm so sorry.
Yes.